Hi, I'm Adam and welcome back to First Man Photography. In today's video, I want to talk about what I think is the most beautiful way to do photography. If you are lazy and you want the quick answer, it's long exposure. But if you want the more interesting answer, stick around and come with me. Before we get going today though, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a domain name, a website, or an online store, make your next move with Squarespace. So I've come to the Yorkshire coast, and as you can see, I am set up for my first shot. Now, undoubtedly, the best way I think to do photography is to come to a landscape and just be able to have the time to absorb it, explore it, get a sense and a feel of the area. Tap in almost as best you can to the flow of nature, so you almost get into that flow state where the image almost makes itself. And I know that sounds silly, but we have to work towards mastering the technical so we can start thinking about those compositions and just naturally letting them happen without having to worry about our cameras. One of the techniques that I think is the most beautiful way to do photography is to do long exposure. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here, because long exposure just works so well at the coast, and they also provide a really beautiful and interesting juxtaposition between the things that are moving in the scene and the things that are static. So behind me now we have that beautiful sea, which almost has a greeny type turquoise colour to it, which is common in this area. We've got those beautiful clouds, then the cliffs there, providing that static, resolute object. Long exposures work really quite well when it's not as windy, because as we set the camera on the tripod, we don't want any movement, and it's a beautifully still day today. And it just feels so good, and I can take my time because it's overcast, which also works well for long exposures because we're not going to get a big light change during the exposure. So for this image, it's not going to be all that complicated really. I want to use the curve of this cliff as it goes around towards the middle of my frame, and I'm capturing some of the waves coming in, like I said, the beautiful colour in the water, and then the clouds. Then I'm thinking about what exposure length I want. Now I have already tried it with a 6-stop filter, and the sea looked good, but some of the clouds much closer to me here are a bit dark, and they sort of almost dominated the image. So I've decided I'm going to go with a 10-stop filter, so they are smoothed out a bit more and they blend in a bit better to the clouds in the distance. I've got this sort of cliff edge going down in front of me here, and I don't particularly want that in, but I want as much of this sort of beach down below in as I can possibly get. So I'm kind of zoomed in to, what am I at, around 28 millimeters to cut off that cliff edge. So at the moment I have my test exposure, which is f11, 1/4 of a second, and ISO 100. And I've calculated that with a 10-stop filter, that's going to require a 4 minute and 16-second exposure. I've used the app Photo Pills to work that out. I haven't just done it in my head. Although you do find that you end up in similar areas every single time with your exposure. I know I'm focused in as well, just focusing on the cliff, and then I'm going to just reach down and get the 10-stop filter and then just slide it in here, and I'm going to lock it off. I need to go into my bulb timer, which is just here, and that should be set 4 minutes 16 seconds, 2-second timer, then move out of the way because I don't want any movement in the camera, and the ground underneath me is quite soft, so as I move my feet around it could move the tripod. So it's firing now, stepped away, and then yeah, just wait for 4 minutes 16 seconds and we'll see what we've got. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. I love it the first time you look at your image with a long exposure. It just looks so different to normal images. That smoothness the softness, the simplification of the areas that have movement in them. And I just love it. It's addictive. With this one, I think there is a slight balance issue from the left-hand side where the cliffs are to the right-hand side where the water is. So it may be that I have to adjust my post-processing and almost push the balance back over. And I'll do that through the use of luminance or brightness in that part of the image, probably with the radial filter. Anyway, I will put the image up now and you can see what you think. I think it's beautiful though. Right, it is now coming up towards sunset and it's turned into a really beautiful evening, much nicer than I thought it was going to be. The sun sort of setting over behind those cliffs there, and I've now just got some lovely colour in the sky. Now, I'm going to try a little bit of a concept here. Right, I just need to interrupt the video there. We'll be going back to the beach in a minute, but that was a concept I was trying there, and it just simply didn't work out because I was trying to stitch together long exposure images into a panorama, and because I didn't have enough static objects in the scene, it just didn't work. But I do want to show you this. Another beautiful way to do photography is to make sure that you print it, and I'm just so thrilled with this panorama. And the reason I could do that is because I've just upgraded the firmware on my Canon Pro 1000 printer, and it lets you do these 1.2 meter long images now. So I've just taken advantage of it, and I was going to do that with the seascape that we just did there, but this does give me a chance to tell you about today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Now, if you need a website as a photographer, there is no better place to go than to Squarespace, and the reason is because it's just so easy to use. You just sign up, use one of their beautiful templates, and then as soon as you've dragged some of your images on there and typed in a few of your words, you're going to have a beautiful and unique looking website. If you wanted to, you can then upgrade it to an online store so you can start selling things like prints or workshops or anything else that your heart desires. They've got great customer service. I've been using them for years and it's just been a great experience all throughout. So go to squarespace.com to start your free trial today, and if you like what you've created, use the offer code FIRSTMAN to get 10% off your first purchase. Right, let's go back to the beach for what I think is a pretty big finish. Right, with that last image being a bit of a concept image, I wanted to make sure I come away with something, and as I've been stood in this spot, which is the same spot I took the last image, the tide has started to come in now, so has made the foreground in front of these cliffs here all the more interesting, and as the sun's setting there's more and more colour coming into the sky in the distance, and it's a place I've wanted to photograph for a long time, or a composition I've wanted to photograph for a long time, and I've never quite had the right conditions because where I'm stood is exceptionally windy sometimes as well, and it's right on this kind of precipice, so it's a bit nerve-wracking when it's extremely windy because these drops off these cliffs are pretty sheer. It's just opening up lovely now, and what the long exposure, what the beautiful part of this image I think is going to be is this foreground where we've got these sort of semi-exposed rocks down here, and as the waves come in they're rolling over those rocks underneath the water and creating a lovely, lovely foam, and that's bringing up that white, brighter part of the foreground. And with the long exposure, it's going to simplify that, it's going to smooth it out and just give, hopefully, a leading line essentially coming up from the bottom left hand of the image, bottom left hand up towards that rock formation in the distance, which is kind of just coming around from the right hand side of the image, and then it's leading us to the edge and then up to that beautiful sky above. So I don't want to waste any more time because it's just looking beautiful now. There's some pink coming into the sky. You might see some of it reflected on my face. So I'm going to bracket, because bracketing works well with a 6-stop filter and long exposures. So the mid exposure is 10 seconds. And that's really easy to work out, because if you go 1 stop either side, it's going to be 5 seconds on the fast exposure, because it's half to go down 1 stop, and up 1 stop is the 20 seconds. I might go 2 stops though, because it's getting a bit dark now. So the cliff face is really dark and I want to have all of that dynamic range. So essentially the sky is still quite bright, but down here is getting really quite dark now. So it needs to be quite long, and it's going to be, I don't know, around double, so 40 seconds, yeah, on the long side. I've upped it to ISO 200 just to make sure it doesn't go any longer than that. So let's go for the 2-second timer. Let that fire off through the 3 images. Oh, but look at it, it's just absolutely beautiful back there. Absolutely beautiful. And that is the whole point, isn't it? To really make the most of these beautiful scenes with those long exposures, to just give that dreamy, ethereal feel. And it's such a beautiful evening. It's so beautiful. It's so still, calm and wonderful. And yeah, I'll show you that image in a minute. But on last week's video, I asked, what more could I ask for? And someone commented saying that that is the sign of a rich man. And if we're talking about money, it's absolutely not the case. However, what I replied was that I think, I aim to live in the moment. And at this very moment, I'm feeling really good. And for me, that's what landscape photography is about, just making these moments and then capturing them and then doing it again and again and again and again. That's what makes me feel good. It gives me the boost. It gives me that feeling of well-being, that mixture of being outdoors and being creative and telling a story and sharing it. And when it comes down to it, for me, that is the most beautiful way to do photography.